Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Brian Fadie. I'm the Clean Energy Program Director at the Montana Environmental Information Center, MEIC. For folks who don't know us, we're a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization founded in 1974 by Montanans who wanted to protect our clean air, clean water, and these days put clean energy onto the grid. We're a membership-based organization. We get over half our funding from our members. And if you like what you hear tonight and you're not already a member, we would love to have you as one. And I have information at our table in the back there. So tonight we're talking about NorthWestern Energy. And in a way, I start with the question, why are we here? Why do we need to be here? The answer at the highest level is because NorthWestern Energy is not like some of the other utilities around the country that are leading the way on clean energy development and moving to a carbon-free energy system. These are just some recent headlines. Iowa's biggest utility, Mid-American Energy, is moving toward an entirely renewable energy portfolio. Just last week, Xcel Energy out of Colorado, and they serve other states as well, it's a very large utility, announced they're going carbon-free by 2050. To the right here, a little hard to see, but there's a utility in Indiana of all places, that has announced it's going coal-free by 2028. There are utilities around the country that are leading on clean energy and going to carbon-free systems. And unfortunately, NorthWestern has not been one of them. But I am a hopeful person. I'm generally a positive person. The message at the bottom, it can be. It can be. Utilities can be the hero on climate change. Utilities can lead the way toward a clean energy future if they want to. And I would argue we would be supportive of that. Tonight is not just about bashing NorthWestern, I don't think. Some of it is about recognizing and trying to send a message to the company that if you do the right thing, we can be supportive of you. We can be supportive of you doing new infrastructure builds of wind and solar and energy efficiency. But you have to do the right thing. So what has NorthWestern been doing? The company has been fighting pro-renewable energy policies at the local, state, and federal level for years. The Rooftop solar policy, which is called net metering, they have been fighting it at the state legislature. They are fighting it at the Public Service Commission, which regulates NorthWestern. The company filed a proposal at the end of September, actually, that would change the way rooftop solar customers are treated going forward. It would make those systems much less economical. It could cost an average residential customer over $600 a year in unavoidable charges to become a rooftop solar customer, charges that couldn't be offset by solar generation. It would extremely harm these rooftop solar systems for new customers, and that's what the company proposed. MEIC is fighting that, Sierra Club is fighting that, Montana Renewable Energy Association and others are going to be fighting that. Montana's Renewable Portfolio Standard. This was our 15% by 2015 renewable energy policy. It was passed in 2005. The company fought it then. It opposed the bill in the state legislature, and it's been fighting it since in various forms. And you may have read recently about the Community Renewable Energy Projects lawsuit that MEIC brought against NorthWestern and the Public Service Commission. That's part of the Renewable Portfolio Standard. It's a separate and additional requirement on top of the 15% by 2015 that NorthWestern has not yet met, and they've been trying to kill the requirement at the state legislature as well as at the Public Service Commission. And then the federal PURPA law, we don't need to go into exactly what the details of that are, but just know that it's a federal law that encourages wind and solar projects by independent power producers, and the company has been fighting that law at the state legislature and then at the Public Service Commission as well. NorthWestern also joined the legal fight against the Clean Power Plan. That was the Obama administration's sort of signature climate policy. It was going to be very reasonable restrictions on carbon emissions from particularly coal-fired power plants. And the company joined the lawsuits to block the implementation of that plan. And then at the bottom here, the company's most recent long-term plan. Every couple of years, they put together this 20-year look ahead of what is our energy demand going to be and how are we going to meet that. And in the most recent one from 2015, it had 0 new wind or solar, only new fossil fuel gas plants in that plan. It's an example of how the company has very little interest in doing wind or solar or energy efficiency. It's most interested in fossil fuel plants. A very brief company overview, just to get a sense of this thing. What is this company? Who are they? What's some of the big picture structure that they operate in? The most important thing, if there is one thing that you remember from tonight, it's that first point and the bold and underline. It is a for-profit company. It is not a nonprofit. It is not like the electric co-ops that some folks are a member of, Missoula Electric Co-op, Flathead Electric Co-op. Those are not-for-profit entities. NorthWestern is a for-profit company with all of the motivations that come with that. It's looking to maximize revenue. That's its charge. It has shareholders. It has a board of directors. It has a stock price that it pays attention to. Maybe worth noting, the company is headquartered in South Dakota. They do operate in a little bit in Nebraska, a little bit in South Dakota. Primarily, about 80% of their company does its work in Montana, but it does have operations in those other states. It has a board of directors, only 2 of which out of 8 are Montanans, one of which is Bob Rowe, so that's kind of a cheater one. So really, it's only 1 of 7. The rest of them are out-of-state folks. It's a state-protected monopoly. This is the regulatory compact that it operates under. The state says, okay, we think it's in our best interest to just have one utility company serving customers with electricity. Some of that makes sense. A practical reason, if you had 7 different electric companies and they all had wires and poles running everywhere to every customer, that would be a bit of a mess. So the state says, okay, we're going to have one utility. You're going to get the customers. You're going to be a monopoly. We'll protect that. But in return, we get more of a say over the company's operations and the company's decisions, how much money the company makes. That's the job of the Public Service Commission. They are those regulators. The company has a team of lobbyists and lawyers who then try to influence those regulators and influence the rules by which they operate, both at the state capitol with legislators and at the Public Service Commission, both with the elected commissioners themselves as well as with staff. These are very smart, well-paid folks who carry a lot of influence both at the legislature and at the Public Service Commission. And sometimes people ask, how does the company have such sway? Why does it have so much power? One, it can operate as a for-profit company. It can make donations to candidates for office. It can influence who gets, say, the Chamber of Commerce endorsement in a primary election, which is very important in Republican primaries oftentimes, or in the general election. It can do those things that, as advocates, we can't do. One of them, though, that people don't often think about too much is, it might be a little hard to read from the back, but at the bottom here I have a quote from Travis Kabula, who is a current Public Service Commissioner, Republican, pretty well-respected one. And he's got this statement that he makes oftentimes about, why do utilities get their way so often? And he says, many Republican legislators, they just say, we are pro-business. The utility is a business. So where do I sign? How do I help them? And they start from that position. And it's kind of hard to move them off of that with a lot of legislators. So that's certainly a dynamic that we see both at the legislature and the Public Service Commission. So, how does the company make decisions? Utility decision making. Go back to that for-profit company, and it truly is as easy as this. What factors do they consider for new power plants? Profit, 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 along with keeping the lights on. It is a revenue-based company. It is a profit. It's for-profit. It has shareholders. It has a stock price. It's looking to maximize that revenue. And so, yes, there are other considerations about what to build, when to build it, but at the end of the day, the folks in the executive suites are thinking about what is the financial interest of the company, not necessarily of customers. In the utility world, they make money They make more money the more they spend. So the more spending that a utility makes, the more profit that it's going to make. Essentially, at a very simple level, every few years, the utility will come into the Public Service Commission and lay out all of its costs of doing business. How much does it cost to keep the lights on? And there's a little bit of back and forth about what costs are reasonable, what costs are not reasonable. At the end of the day, they end up with a certain amount of cost to keep the lights on. And then they tack on a reasonable profit margin, somewhere usually between 8 and 12% on top of that cost. So the higher the costs, the more costs that they have, the greater that profit is going to be, because you're multiplying it by somewhere between 8 and 11 and 12%. So the utilities are incentivized to spend more money. What are the big ticket items? What costs the most? What ramps up that cost and thus the profits? Tends to be infrastructure, big infrastructure projects, power plants, pipelines, transmission lines, upgrades to the grid, things that cost a lot of money. As it turns out, gas plants require quite a bit of infrastructure. Not only do you have to build the plant, but you have to be able to deliver gas to the plant to burn and create the electricity. That's a whole other level of infrastructure and a whole other level of cost. And that's important because with NorthWestern, they want to build a lot of new gas plants. But if they're going to do this entire build out that they're talking about or have talked about in their plan, they're going to need new gas infrastructure. They're going to need new gas pipelines. And they have said this themselves. This comes from the company's 2013 long-term resource plan. They say the natural gas pipelines that serve NorthWestern service territory are near full capacity. These constraints necessitated installation of a dual fuel capability at the nominally natural gas fueled Dave Gates gas plant, which is near Anaconda. Installation of new significant gas-fired generation anywhere in the NorthWestern service territory will likely require pipeline capacity upgrades or interruptible pipeline service with diesel fuel as a backup. They need new pipelines in order to do this massive gas build-out. And that's important to remember because at the end of the day, the company wants to spend more money in order to make more profit. And I think that is a big motivator, a big influencer on the company's decision-making. If something costs less to serve customers, that's not necessarily in the financial interest of the company. So not only is the infrastructure for gas plants expensive, but the cost of the fuel, the cost of the gas, that gets passed on to customers. And if the cost of the gas goes up, the company can make more money. The risk of that increased cost is entirely borne by the customers. The company doesn't lose money if the cost of gas fluctuates up or down. In fact, it makes more money if the cost of gas goes up. And they pointed this out. Again, this is the company's own information. This is from their application to purchase the hydroelectric dams back in 2014. I pulled this from their filing. They say the addition of the hydros at the time would remove a significant amount of market risk to which customers are currently exposed. They're saying if we buy the hydros, we don't have to purchase as much electricity off the open market. We don't have to expose ourselves to the changing gas prices. And the quote goes on, other types of generators, particularly natural gas-fired plants, carry significant exposure to markets for fuel supply. And at the bottom here, I've got a little graph. This is the price of gas at what's called the Henry Hub. It's a trading hub for natural gas around the country. It's often seen as sort of the indicator of the price of gas. And you don't really need to know, precisely what the units are, but you can see that it fluctuates. It changes. It goes up and down. 2006, you see it spikes from around $6 per unit up to $12 for a year. Does it again in 2008. Huge spike. And it can do that again. That's a price risk. That's a cost risk that we as customers have to pay. The company doesn't have to pay that. So gas plants, they're expensive and they're risky, is the point. Here's where I get a little optimistic again. Here's where I get a little positive again. I do think that we have potential for common ground with the utility. utilities want to build stuff. Turns out we want to build stuff too. We want to build wind. We want to build solar. We want to build energy storage. We want to invest in energy efficiency programs where the utility can recover its costs for it. We want to build things too. And utility revenue isn't in and of itself an evil. Somebody has to operate the grid. Somebody needs to recover the costs for doing that. That's fine. That's what it takes to keep the lights on. But we need to do that in a way that's climate safe. And so I think it is important to remember that it's not entirely about bashing on Northwestern. I do think that there is an opportunity to be supportive of the company, but they have to be doing the right thing too. And luckily, renewable energy and energy efficiency can save customers money. And again, I'm sorry if it's harder to read the graph toward the back, but this is a graph of the cost of different power plants that Northwestern owns. And going from the left is a wind facility, South Peak Wind Facility. It's contracted at $22 a megawatt hour. It will be their cheapest power plant when it comes online. It's a wind facility. Then you got $31 for Judith Gap Wind Facility. Their two cheapest power plants are wind. They own other power plants, but I've taken them out just for demonstration purposes. Hydroelectric dams come in at $58, that's the blue one. Colstrip is on the far right, $74 a megawatt hour. It is their most expensive power plant. Wind is far cheaper than Colstrip. So it can save customers money. And all of this information comes from the Montana Consumer Council. This is not our information. This is from a government office that reviews Northwestern's filings, and they produced the cost information here. So a little bit about the company, a little bit about their motivations. Let's get down a little bit into the nitty-gritty. How does this actually happen? At a big picture level, how do they actually go from having an idea about a power plant to actually getting approval to where it can be built? There's really three key stages. First, they produce a long-term plan that identifies their electricity need and ways that they can meet it. So again, every couple of years, they put together this plan. It looks out 20 years and it says, okay, 10 years from now, how much energy will we need to meet all of our demand? 15, 20 years, how much energy are we going to need? And then it looks at different options for meeting that need. Once they have the plan, when the need arises, they'll issue a request for proposals for projects to meet that need. So the company, Northwestern, does not have a construction arm. It doesn't build something itself. It will issue a request for proposals, and developers will bid in projects. They'll say, I can build this type of power plant, I can build that type of power plant. It can produce this much energy or meet this need at this price, yada, yada. They take in those requests or those proposals, and they do a process. They kind of winnow them down, look at the bids. They say, okay, this developer looks good. They got a pretty good price. They got a pretty good company, good background, good equity. This one doesn't, we'll kick them out. Ultimately, they'll pick a project to bring before the Public Service Commission, and they will give the final yes, no approval to a power plant. And whether or not the company gets to put that power plant into its rate base and recover its costs with that profit margin. And I want to jump into each of those three really briefly here, because we're talking about how can we be involved? How can we have an impact in these key steps in the process? Starting with the long-term plan. We are in this stage right now. The company is developing its next long-term plan. David mentioned there was potentially going to be a meeting on a draft plan in November that ended up getting canceled. They have delayed the production of that plan. Right now, the deadlines that we have are the company has to produce a draft plan by March 15th of next year, 2019. There then has to be a 60-day public comment period, and then only after that can the company submit the final plan to the Public Service Commission. And they have to do that by December of next year, 2019. And that's going to provide a lot of opportunity for public comment and review. The last plan that they did again in 2015, it was awful. it was just universally panned by all stakeholders, really. They didn't produce it with a very good process. Their cost estimates for wind and solar were just absurd. They used a 25 megawatt wind facility to estimate out the cost for wind. That's a very small facility. You wouldn't do a 25 megawatt facility for NorthWestern to meet the needs that it has. It would be much larger. The cost would be lower. On the solar side, they only modeled a 3 megawatt size facility, which again is just very small. You don't access any of the economies of scale of doing a much larger facility. So that plan was really panned universally, and now they're coming up with a new plan. We're going to need to review the plan. We're going to need to see what's in it. We're going to need to check their numbers. What are their cost estimates for wind, for solar, for energy efficiency, for battery storage, which is now a player in the energy world. MEIC will be doing that in depth. The Sierra Club will. Others will. Again, I would encourage you to become members of our organizations, and we'll be keeping everyone informed about what's in it, when the comment deadlines are, arm you with information, and then get those comments into the company and the commission, because that's going to have a big impact on whether or not this plan can justify whatever power plant NorthWestern is trying to build. And I'm predicting it's going to be a gas plant, but we'll see. Second step, request for proposals. They'll issue this. This whole process, this request for proposal process, it's very squishy. It's not really defined terribly well about the requirements of it. When the company issues the request, it's going to take the bids and score them internally based upon the offers it receives. So, is the company a large company with a long history of developing projects such that you could trust that they could actually build what they say they're building? They might assign that a score in the request for proposal process once they get the bids. But they're not required to display publicly what that scoring is. How many points do they assign to that? What if internally they're assigning 100% of the score to it being a fossil fuel plant that they can turn on and off at any moment? And anything that's not that gets kicked out of the request for proposal process. We don't know without transparency. So we're going to have to fight for that transparency at the Public Service Commission and at the legislature potentially to try to make sure that the public knows that this process is fair to renewables, to energy efficiency, that we're getting a good deal, that we're not overpaying, that the company isn't undermining the process and kind of turning the knob so that it gets what it wants rather than what's good for customers. So when the plan comes out, the final long-term plan comes out, the company will likely issue one of these requests for proposals. So that'll likely be sometime next year. And again, if you're a member of one of our organizations, we'll let you know, and we'll let you know how to get involved. So they issue an RFP, they get the bids back, they do the scoring, they cut it down to a short list of projects, they pick one, they got to come to the commission to get approval. The Public Service Commission is 5 elected commissioners. They're elected on a partisan basis. They run as either a Republican or a Democrat. They run in geographically defined districts. So Missoula area is represented by Bob Lake right now. And Helena has a different commissioner. Great Falls has a different commissioner. It's based up by geography. We've got 5 Republicans on that commission right now, and that's going to remain the same after this election. You need 3 of them to side with you, or 3 votes in any given direction for something to pass. 3 of the 5. The PSC, there really is 2 kind of parts to the commission. You have the commissioners themselves, and then you have the professional staff that work there. And they really are good folks who are doing a good job and understand what NorthWestern files and asks tough questions. And I think the staff is great. The commissioners who actually vote, they are much different. Sometimes they kind of have strong personal values and philosophies and convictions that they're consistent with, and sometimes they just show up to a hearing and vote some any which way that they're feeling that day. They're much less predictable. And that can be a challenge to work with. But they are elected by us, the voters, and so they need to be responsive to us. You can contact your commissioner at any time. Send them an email, send them a letter, call their office at any time, and I would encourage folks to do so, to contact your commissioner to let them know what you think about any given issue. I want to note kind of the third bullet down, far right, the Consumer Council. There's an office, a government office called the Montana Consumer Council. They represent consumers writ large in the state, and they have a strong voice at the Public Service Commission, as well as at the legislature, because they are supposed to be this very apolitical, nonpartisan entity representing consumers and what they want. Now, their charge is to represent on a public interest standard, not a least cost standard, which some consumer council offices around the country have. Ours has a public interest standard. So it's not just about, say, the least possible cost resource they can find. That's what they'll support. They have to take into consideration people's concerns about climate change, people's concerns about pollution. They have to at least take that into consideration when taking their positions. And so I've got their contact info on a couple slides down here, but I would want to flag that for folks as an office that has a powerful voice at the commission that really needs to hear from everyday consumers a lot more. And then if they do go through the approval process, writing letters to the editor and other general public pressure is always helpful. You know, the commissioners are human at the end of the day. So anything to raise the visibility of the decision that's in front of them is always helpful. Grassroots pressure, what can we do? You got to remember at the end of the day, for NorthWestern, we are customers. We are their customers. We can demand action of our utility. It is entirely legitimate, and we should be doing so. You do not have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a lawyer or an accountant. You don't have to know the answers to everything. If you want 100% clean electricity, you can call them up. You can write them a letter and say, I want 100% clean electricity. It's not your job to know every single detail of how to make that happen. Expressing yourself and your wants as a customer is entirely legitimate, and we should all be trying to do that more often. We are citizens as well of the state. We can demand action of our representatives who have a powerful voice in all of these processes. The public service commissioners, we elect them. We should be talking to them. The governor, in terms of the legislative process, what bills get passed, what bills get vetoed that impact rules of the Public Service Commission or other energy incentive programs of the state. Same with legislators. Cities and counties. The city of Missoula, the county of Missoula, they represent customers. They can speak as a voice to the legislature, to the company, and say, we represent the folks here in our town or our county, and this is what we want. And so things like resolutions or other policy enactments that say we want 100% clean energy or we don't want fossil fuels, those are very powerful messages. And so working at the local level with our cities and counties and saying this is what we want is very important. And then finally, yes, the Consumer Council at the bottom here. Got their phone number. The head of the office, his name is Bob Nelson. Got his email there. You can look it up on their website as well. But they certainly need to hear from folks. They have not heard from everyday consumers very much over the years. But we are the folks that they are charged with representing, and our views need to be heard within that office. And then join your local orgs that are fighting for a clean energy future. It is our job to keep our members informed about what's going on, about what is in these dense filings that are hundreds of pages long, and keep you confident when there are opportunities for public comment, what you can say, what you can do. We want you to feel strong when you have to go in front of the Public Service Commission or write a letter to the editor or what have you. We'll alert you when there are opportunities to make a difference. You know, we don't spam you, at least NIC doesn't spam you with tons of emails and requests and everything. We make sure it's an important point in the decision-making process. and we let you know when that's taking place. And if you do choose to support us, you're powering low-cost, effective legal and technical expertise. I know all of the organizations doing work do a great job of partnering with other organizations in the region, national groups, law offices that represent us at very low cost with tremendous effective advocacy in front of the Commission. And your support to us really helps make that possible. So why are we here? Because today, NorthWestern is not one of these utilities. They're not leading the way. But with our efforts and our work, we can make it so.